Welcome to another episode of Foresight TV. I've got Greg Puklicz. Did I do that more or less right, Greg?
Pretty close. Pretty good.
Okay, we're going to get back to that in a minute. Who leads 12 Oak Senior Living. We're going to have a great conversation. But before we get started, I want to talk about a couple of things. First off, thanks so much for watching Foresight TV. I know that Foresight's not the place for everybody in the senior living industry. But if you are in the industry and you're committed to creating great experience for residents, team members, and family members, this is the place to be. We believe that it can always be better. I don't care how good it is. And so that's our goal, is to improve the lives of people who live and work in senior living. I would love to hear from you about what you're doing to improve the lives of residents. Maybe you should be on an episode of Foresight TV or Tech Tuesday. And if there are things you think we ought to be talking about, addressing, we would love to hear about that. And I guess if there are things you think we should shut up about, we would be glad to hear about that. We produce all kinds of great thought leadership content in addition to Foresight TV. We've got new LinkedIn content every day. We've got the Foresight podcast, Tech Tuesday. The most impactful thing we do is the Foresight website, where we publish new leadership content every day. It's free. It's easy to subscribe to. There's a QR code up on the screen. There's also a link in the chat. Just click on that, put your email in, and you will be good to go. Last night, I wrote one of the most powerful articles I've ever written, the longest article I think I've ever written for publication, where I talk about how maybe we need a moment or three of self-reflection in the industry. The last thing I want to talk to you about before we get into our conversation with Greg is that we know that everybody wants to create great workplaces where people love coming to work every day. It's really, really hard to do. We've created a new subscription product called Passionate Practical Leadership. It gives leaders practical things they can do to build better teams. They're easy, they're simple. It does take some shifting. It's practically free. We'd love to have you check that out. Again, QR screen up on the screen, a QR code up on the screen, and a link in chat. And with that, let's get started. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Greg, welcome back. I want to start by saying that I appreciate your haircut. It looks a lot like mine, and
it does.
Guys, God made a few perfect heads, and the rest He put hair on.
That's right.
Let's start by talking a little bit about who you are and 12 Oaks and what makes you unique.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Steve. It's great to be back here with you again. So 12 Oaks Senior Living, founded in the early 80s by Dick Blaylock as a Dallas, Texas-based regional operator. Over the years, 12 Oaks has developed and operated properties throughout Texas. But over the past 4 to 5 years, we have intentionally tried to grow our platform to become the best-in-class regional operator in the Southwest. And as a result, right now, we operate 36 communities, predominantly in Texas and Oklahoma. That's our wheelhouse. I do have a few favors outside of the states because we do a pretty good job at turnarounds and fixing communities that need a little love. So I've gotten calls from clients to venture out of state and help them out with some of those communities, which we're very happy to do. So we're a third-party manager. Right now, we don't own any real estate except for one small little deal in the Dallas area. And our focus, therefore, is entirely on operations. So I don't go to bed at night wondering what are interest rates going to do, what's going to happen to my mortgage payment. I'm worried about how do I provide the nutrients to our people in community so that they can be the best they can be. That's our mission.
Oh man, I love that so much. I have to tell you. So one of the things that I'm very, very puzzled by right now is that I've seen you at a bunch of conferences or number of
Mhm.
conferences over the last few months, and one of the reoccurring themes that we are hearing is this idea that we've got the baby boomers who are just coming, and there's going to be I've heard it from stage probably a dozen times that we're going to have this massive shortage of senior living units. And we can point to communities and we can point to companies where they've got very high occupancy. But there was also a story out this week that told us that a bunch of Brookdale buildings were under they've got more than 100 buildings that are under 70% and a bunch more that are in the 70 to 80 range. And so it seems like so I'm wondering, what do you think? Are we really on the verge of everybody being full because of demographics?
So we are not on the verge of it, right? So the much talked about silver tsunami is much like Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. I know you're a literary fan, Steve. So, we keep waiting and waiting for what doesn't show up, right? And looking at this from an economic point of view, just raw demand and supply. Okay, so the supply side has definitely leveled out, right? Because there is no new supply, no meaningful new supply coming into the market. We are actually seeing some communities get repurposed. So supply side is very flat. Demand is increasing. At 12 Oaks, we've over the past 2 years have increased occupancy nearly 15 points. So we have had a very good increase in occupancy. I would say it's more operational than it is demand push, right? I think it's demand pull, meaning we've done things in community that have enhanced occupancy. So, the boomers are aging out. The problem is the goalposts keep getting moved, right? The average age of move in keeps moving, and it's moving almost faster than the um, demand is increasing, month over month, quarter over quarter, year over year. So people are delaying the decision to move into senior housing. What we need to do as an operator and as an industry is change the value proposition to the boomers that are out there to convince them that moving into senior housing is a viable option for them, right? They are delaying the move into senior housing because it's still all the same old fears, right? That's for old people. No, I can take care of myself. No, I don't need help, right? And we hear it 1,000 times, the story. Somebody moved in and they're like, after 90 days, oh my God, why didn't I do this 2 years ago? How do we get that message out to people, right? And convince them that senior housing is for them. So as an industry, I don't know that we've done a really good job in making the public at large aware of the benefits of senior housing, right? It's still kind of the residence of last resort, and it shouldn't be, right? People are trying to stay in their homes, and I get it, right? In the emotional attachment, we talk about untangling emotions during our uh, selling process, and that's a big part of it. But what we need to do is a better job at explaining the benefits as an industry, right? We have no cohesive industry marketing platform. I know Asha, and I'm on the executive board of Asha, has talked about this. The Know Where You Live campaign, right, and things like that. But man, that is just scratching the surface. I think there needs to be a real effort to increase public awareness of the benefits of senior housing. Right now, we're doing that, on an individual basis, community by community. And that's a heavy lift, right, for us to do that. So that's a very overarching general comment. The other thing too is, you know, there's this metamorphosis, I think, going on in senior housing today as we move from the social model to the medical model. And we need to make people aware of that and understand the benefits of that. And things we're trying to do at 12 Oaks, like introducing value based care by introducing new technology to improve wellness and better outcomes for residents, to increase length of stay, right? All those things are ultimately going to benefit the residents and make the senior housing experience more enjoyable. So, man, it's a heavy lift still. Um, the last thing I want to say about that, Steve, and your comment specific, and this isn't, to pick on Brookdale, but this is an industry thing. There's so much vintage product out there that hasn't been updated for the last 10 years or so. And, people keep trying to pound square pegs and round holes. That old vintage product at those price points doesn't work. And, this is something at 12 Oaks we have quite a bit of experience in, coming into communities that have been in default, communities that, are in receivership, that are struggling on occupancy, and really assessing, what is the community's place in its market. And sometimes that means cutting rents, spending money on capital, and filling the place up and earning a 22% operating margin. If you've got vintage product, you can't go back to, well, 10 years ago, we were 92% occupied and had a 32% margin. Yeah, well, you haven't spent a penny on the property in the last 10 years, and market dynamics have changed, and now you're a vintage product and you've got to adjust. And a lot of real estate owners aren't doing that. So that's a lot to unpack, Steve.
Okay, so I got so many things. You touched on the note that I made for the next question. I'm gonna jump ahead and then come back to it for a minute. So
Sure.
here's the question that I find myself wondering is, you talk about these old products that are obsolete, and I know that one of the big problems is they don't often at times don't have big enough units, and they don't have enough storage, and they don't have lots of stuff. But I also know that I've been in, hundreds and hundreds of senior living communities, and I've been in some really nice, new, fancy chandeliers, beautiful, beautiful communities that felt sterile, like I was walking into a hotel rather than a home. And I've also been into some pretty old vintage properties where I walked in and said, oh man, this just feels good. So I wonder if it's possible to take some of these older properties and create, I don't know, a living experience that's so good that you could actually get, even though the units and some of the physical attributes are sort of, I don't know, it's maybe substandard isn't the right word, but are certainly archaic, and still create a premium product.
Yeah, so absolutely, Steve. And this is something we've done specifically in the IL space, right? Some vintage properties, and we've come up with a middle market model that's been exceptionally effective. And what that is taking some of these vintage properties and doing light renovations, right? When I say light renovations, usually it's flooring, painting. Let's move on from the avocado greens and oranges and all those colors, right? Clean up the colors, the flooring, and what we've done is reposition the properties to a more affordable pricing structure. There's a large swath of seniors that are largely ignored, who need housing. And not only do they need housing, they need food service, and they need access to health care, and they need transportation services, and they need socialization, by way of activities. And what we've done is, gone in, done light renovations to these communities. Um, we've changed our operating model. So on food service, for example, we've gone to buffet style dining, right? And for the buffet style dining, we use a universal worker model. So we don't have servers, we don't have dishwashers. We're cooking and filling the line. And, when it's mealtime, the housekeepers and maintenance and even, leadership staff shows up, and those residents that need help with their tray, right? They help the residents and they help them pick up their trays and put them away. So we don't have dining staff per se, right? We use we everybody chips in the community, and because it's buffet dining, we are producing high quality food that the seniors like, simple cooking, but it's 5.25, right? PRD. It's very cost effective, and our staffing levels are low, and so we're able to get that OpEx per unit way down from a traditional model, and we can charge less rents. And the lesser rents we're charging are letting us lease up quicker than we otherwise would. And I'll give you a specific example. These are Texas numbers. We have one bedrooms for like 1,900 and studios for about 1,500, and we're 95% occupied. Right? People who only have their social security check, right, can afford to live there. And that's the story of taking a vintage product, you know, de- designing an operating model that's cost effective, and we're filling a need right in the market. And we've now replicated that 3 times, and we're about to do it for our 4th time.
That I love. There's so many things I love about that. First thing I'm going to just take a short aside here is your dog is barking, and I can see you have your left hand on the dog, and
Yep.
I've got 2 dogs on the floor down here, and my golden is very very sensitive to dogs on the screen, and so I'm having to do the same thing with her. So
So yes.
it just makes me laugh. I've actually got 2 on the floor. We went out walking before it got too hot here. So one of the things I like about your model, and I'm sure you've thought about this, is that when I read online forums of people who work in senior living, one of the things that frontline workers complain about is they feel like they're really put down by even the department heads, executive directors. They feel very separated from the department heads and directors. And when you've got that universal model where everybody's working together to do everything, that universal worker, including the executive director, it just sends this wonderful message that we're all in this together.
Yep.
And that we all have a common purpose, a common mission. And that is so, so powerful. I'm just crazy in love with that.
Yep. No, it's very effective, and those communities have the least amount of turnover too. That's where we've got the best tenure in employees, because there's a real sense of satisfaction and accomplishment and connection to the residents. And that community has, those communities have some of our longest length of stays for residents, longest tenure, least amount of turnover. They're stable, right? The model works.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that could work in a more upscale community? That staffing model?
So I believe it can. I think we get to a point. So when we say more upscale, if we say that's a C community, right? Because of price point, talking real estate classes, B community, yes, I would say it would work. AL, it can work, right? When we get to an A community where we're going to have, AL rents and a newer vintage community where the basis, right? And it's everything comes in real estate comes down to basis, right? What are you into the community for? If you're into it for 50 grand a door versus 300 grand a door, obviously that's going to impact the rents you need to charge to be able to even make a return, let alone a cash flow. So it works to a point, but when you get into higher end communities, there's a different service model. There's an expectation of menu dining, plated food, service,
Yep.
that type of thing. So that's a different model too. And in those models, you need to find other ways to be cost conscious and effective while still delivering, that level of service.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. So, want to step back to this question I'd made note on, and you sort of touched on pieces of it, but I'd like to maybe have you do it for sort of from the top down. So you're sitting in your office on Monday morning, and you get this call from somebody at a REIT saying, "Oh man, Greg, I got this building." And it wasn't doing very well. They put a new executive director in there, and that executive director has just crashed the occupancy. And so we were cranking along at 80, which wasn't very good. And now we're at 65. And I need you to come in. We're going to kick out the old operator. We're going to bring you in. We're going to fix it. When you walk into those kinds of buildings, what are typically the problems, the most urgent problems you need to fix, the things you see they're doing wrong?
So typically, the number one problem is lack of vision and cohesiveness and support of the leadership team at the community, right? And we just took over a community in May 1st, actually, in Utah. And there's a situation where we have a fantastic ED who wasn't getting home office support and also wasn't getting support from some other members on the leadership team. And we made those assessments, interviewed all the leadership. I sent a big transition team of 10 people out there for a week, and concluded pretty quickly that there needed to be some changes in some of the leadership roles, not the ED. The ED is high quality, but it was a function of the ED was on an island, not getting home office support, not getting support from his subordinates. And, we made changes, and we came in strong and hot, with home office support. And, we transitioned without some of those leadership positions filled, and it's a breath of fresh air for everybody. And, even some of the comments we got from some of the residents, right? The residents know, they see what's going on, right? And, we talked to the resident council president, and he was ecstatic with all the changes we're making. So, first thing is, we're in the people business. So the first thing to look at is the people, right? And if we can get the right team in place, give them the tools and support they need, they can be successful. There needs to be a business plan and a strategy, right? And all those things, right? But that's what we help them develop at home office. But we need to support them and make sure they're getting the resources and support and encouragement that they need to be successful.
I saw a recent quote. I don't think I can give it to you exactly, but I can give you the essence. And it was something that came from Richard Branson, the founder of Virgin Everything, right? But he says that every company is at its core just a collection of people working on something big. And I like that so much. And I think that there's hardly a place where that's truer than in senior living, right? And that we all have to be on this mission together. We have to be supporting each other. And I love the story about the executive director being all alone on an island, because I think mostly people want to do a good job. That's not always true, but mostly people want to do a good job. And they either do a good job or a bad job based on how they're led, how they're treated by the people who hired them, their leadership. And we can take ordinary people, we can even sometimes take bad people and turn them into great people by just treating them differently. So I love that. I love that a ton. We've only got about 5 minutes left. I would like to shift a little bit to kind of what you and 12 Oaks is thinking and how you guys are looking at technology and AI. And then we'll close out with sort of the future of senior living.
You bet. AI. Well, if I listen to all the vendors, AI is going to save the world, right? And I'm still trying to get some of my systems to talk to each other. However, so I do see a role for AI, right? I see the importance of data. I see the ability to summarize, the ability to collect data and tabulate things very quickly, instantly now, right? The ability to get all the data points you need on your phone, right? But still, somebody's got to kind of have the vision to put it all together. And so there are huge opportunities vis-a-vis the technology and AI. And we at 12 Oaks are all in on that. We've evaluated a number of different technologies. And for us, there's two major initiatives this year. The first is starting our journey into value-based care. We converted all our EHR systems at all the communities to August Health, right? And we're happy with that transition, and we like how they collect data. And the next thing we're doing is we are piloting Inspiron at several communities, and we've looked at many different options. And we like a lot of them, like Care Predict and Safely You. We really like what Inspiron does and how it connects and provides data on caregivers, scheduling, residents, all those things. So we are now starting to launch into some of these things. So that's the data on the care side as we expand the value proposition into value-based care. And then on the operational side, the ability to collect data on rents, on move-in information, on care, unit type availability. I mean, there's just so much we can do and have access to so quickly. What we've got to do now is operationalize all this data, and we are developing dashboards of relevant data. Right? It's incumbent upon us to figure out, what do you need to know? Because you can know everything, but what is it you really need to know to be successful and stay on mission, right? So that's the harder part of it. But the tools are clearly there.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge that I see is we've gotten so good at collecting data. Now we've got this data, and the big question still remains is, how do we use that data in a way to be effective? And I think we've got some clues, and there's some people who are doing some of it, but I think that's great. That is an opportunity that's still ahead of us. And I think the next step, even after that, it becomes much more predictive. How do I use that data to tell me that somebody's likely to have a health event or is not doing as well socially as they could? And so it's exciting stuff. So one last thing I want to just touch bases with you on is the future of senior living. We're moving certainly much more to a care-based model than a social model, and yet much of the benefit comes from social. And you're probably not quite as old as I am, but you and I look like we're probably in close to sort of the same age range, and we're not going to be able to do this forever, right? And so how do you sort of see the future of the new generation?
I think we need to do more to encourage kind of Gen Z to get involved in senior housing, and connect, to make connections and build relationships with residents. That's the opportunity there, and that's kind of difficult. We have a lot of turnover in our caregiver staffs, and I'd love to see more younger people come into senior housing. You know, the stories about senior housing, like if you ask somebody, how did you get involved in senior housing? If I can't count on one hand how many people have said, yes, when I was a kid, I wanted to get into senior housing, right? Everybody seems to have fallen into it, in some peculiar way, right? Some kind of side door into senior housing. We need to, as an industry, create awareness and opportunities for younger people to get involved, because it is fulfilling work, right? And we talk about, well, I can make 18 bucks an hour flipping burgers, or I can be a caregiver. Well, that's true, right? But I mean, isn't the connection with people, and if you have a servant's heart and you want to help people, right? Isn't that more fulfilling, in the end? So how do we convey that messaging to the new generation? And that's a tough one.
It is a tough one, and I think that being able to tell stories of changing lives is ultimately where the key is, making it so that it feels good when it comes to work every day. There are clearly not enough people in this country sort of to fill all the frontline jobs that are out there. But I think if we tell the story right and we treat our frontline workers right, it'll be senior living will do a much better job of attracting and retaining people, and it'll be Starbucks and McDonald's and Burger King that struggle with finding those frontline workers instead of us. And I'm afraid right now it's the opposite of that. So
true, very true.
Yeah. So, Greg, thank you very much. We're out of time. I wish I had another 45 minutes or an hour to do this, but amazing conversation. I guess, I feel like I'm a kindred spirit with you because it's all about the operations and the people. So appreciate you taking the time out to visit with us to share your wisdom. And I'll see you soon on the road, I guess. So
you bet.
Very good. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Take care. Thank you.